You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. It's a crossover episode, Locked On Wolverines and Locked On Nittany Lions. For those who are used to be, I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we got Zach Seyko. Sorry, I do have your name on the screen. I forgot. Zach Seyko. There's got to be a better intro. I mean, we just met like 2 minutes ago, essentially. Well, 20 minutes ago, pending platform changes, audio issues, all that stuff. So anyway, Zach, let's talk a little football because it's a big game coming up here.
Yep.
It's number 10, Penn State at number 4, Michigan. Penn State last year also started out 5-0. Michigan last year also started out 6-0. Both teams eventually lost pretty early. Michigan made it to 7-0 before losing to Michigan State. Penn State made it to 5-0 before Sean Clifford goes down at Iowa after it seemed like everything was rolling in Iowa City. And this team seems different, however. This is the first ranked opponent either team has faced. So when you are looking at this matchup, what is it about Penn State? What is it about this group right now that gives you confidence that it is a little bit more legitimate than what ended up being kind of a disappointing year for the Nittany Lions a year ago?
Yeah, it's two guys, and it's Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, both of the two freshman running backs. A year ago, they didn't have that consistent running game. They didn't have the balance. They didn't have that ability to take pressure off of Sean Clifford. Their first down and 10 play was throwing a bubble screen to the slot, right? To Parker Washington. That's how they would keep teams off balance. And now you have Singleton and Allen, who both can do incredible things at the running back position. I mean, it's made everybody better. It's made the backfield better. It's made the wide receivers better because now you have to respect the run game and you can't just game plan and keep two safeties over the top. You got to respect the box a little more. It takes the pressure off of Sean Clifford. He doesn't have to throw as many times. He doesn't have to keep the ball in his hands. He doesn't have to keep it like on the option play. He can give it off with confidence. And then the offensive line even looks better because how much better are they? We're still trying to figure that out. But when you have better guys to block for, it just makes everybody look better. And then that balance also keeps the offense on the field longer, which gives the defense a little extra rest. So those two players, those two 18-year-olds have made all the difference for the Nittany Lions this year.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is, and I moved over to the computer here. I mean, granted, we're all on the computer whenever you're recording anything like this, but I wanted to make sure I had the numbers in front of me here. So I think what makes this interesting is both teams kind of have a good on good situation as far as that's concerned. Like you're talking about the running backs. That's obviously one of Michigan's strengths. But then you go to the other side. Both teams are really good at stopping the run. Penn State, number 5 in the country, allowing an average of 2.96 yards per carry, an average of 79.8 yards per game. Michigan, not really much different. It's through 6 games, 2.62 yards per carry, average of 81.67 yards per game. Because of those types of things, how do you have confidence that they're going to still be able to have that type of success, even going up against, this is certainly for both teams going to be the toughest defensive front that either has seen to this point?
I mean, that's where you're going to have to, there's a little bit of give and take here, because I think that while Penn State won't have as much ease as running the football against in Ohio, against a down Auburn team that we've seen. I mean, Auburn's a shell of itself this year. Central Michigan, whatever have you. Northwestern, that one, I don't know how much you saw of that or looked at the box score. They had 5 fumbles from all 3 running backs.
Yeah, so that's the 17-7 weather game against where anything could happen in a game like that, obviously.
It was classic Big Ten football. So I think that again, it's kind of the back and forth of it. I think that Michigan won't have the same kind of success running the football as well that they've had through the first few games. And the same thing with Penn State. It's just you have that element now that Michigan won't be able to sell out for the pass. They have to say, okay, we got to at least keep 7 guys around the box. And we don't have that luxury anymore of double teaming a Mitchell Tinsley, keeping an extra safety over the top to bracket a Parker Washington in the slot. And Singleton has that capability of hitting the long ball, hitting the big play. And Katron Allen is so good in between the tackles. Like there's this big debate around Happy Valley. Well, who would you rather have, Nicholas Singleton or Katron Allen? And right now it's both because they're good at different things. Singleton's got the breakaway speed. Allen knows how to run the zone in between the tackles, and they're good at what they're good at. And you don't have to ask them to do things that they're not comfortable with. You bring in the running back that you want to have a certain skill set in and a certain play.
Well, let's talk about Michigan's run game, because obviously that Michigan has I'm not making this up. I know that there's weirdly on our channel, we get some Buckeyes and Spartans that love to watch and follow along for whatever reason. Maybe it's scouting the enemy, but I think it's just because they hate themselves. And I'm not making this up, but Michigan has by Vegas. It's out there. It's not super long odds. They have a Heisman contender at running back in Blake Corum. He has been absolutely electric thus far. We haven't really seen as much Donovan Edwards due to injury. They also kind of held him out a little bit, but we still have seen him a little bit. What is your level of concern or level of confidence about going up against Michigan's two-headed monster with those two guys?
I know a little bit more about Blake Corum. Part of that is he actually went to my high school. I throw that out there.
Oh, really? So you went to before he went to St. Francis Academy.
Before he went to St. Francis, yeah. He started at St. Vincent Pallotti, and then he went to St. Francis. But he started there for a few years. But he's a really good running back.
If you went to St. Francis, I'd be like, a little bit more than Blake Corum, but because Michigan is just collecting St. Francis Academy players, that's. But anyways, continue.
No, yeah. I mean, Blake Corum, Chase Young, if you remember Jarrett Patterson, he's on the Commanders. He was part of those high school teams too, believe it or not, oddly enough. But Corum, yeah, just from seeing his glow up, if you will, from high school through now his third season at Michigan. I mean, from a guy who was a solid number 2 last year with Hassan Haskins, now you have a guy that can take over as the bell cow, and he's averaging over 6 yards per carry. He's got 11 touchdowns. Like, he just understands the running back position, and you can't tire him out. He's a guy that you definitely have to account for because I think he can do it all. Now, he hasn't been asked to be a pass catcher out of the backfield, but you just get the football in his hands and he just runs with authority. So it is a big concern, also given the fact that Michigan traditionally has good lines every single year to block for a guy like him. So it's no different. And it's the way that Jim Harbaugh likes to conduct his program, whatever. If it's an NFL team or if it's at Michigan, he likes to run the football first and impose his authority on other teams.
All right, let's continue talking about this game here in a moment. But before we do, listen, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidate available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to create a job post on LinkedIn Jobs. It just takes a matter of moments, and then they start coming in. The resumes, they start rolling in. And then after that, after you add your job, you can add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You want to finish this year strong, just like all of our college football teams want to. So go and get the right team member to do it. And that you can do it right through LinkedIn Jobs. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Zach, let's continue on discussing this game. It is, I do think, when I look at this matchup, the fact that Michigan struggled with Penn State at Penn State last year, and it was not necessarily a dynamic offense at that point, but it's a bit more dynamic. And that gives me pause a little bit defensively, but Michigan's managed to find a way to slow things down enough when it comes to facing other teams, but it's usually taken them about a half. You look at Maryland. Maryland was able to move the ball on the ground, through the air, all of that until about halftime, and then Michigan finally figured things out. So the way that I see a game like this is Michigan's going to probably figure out what to do defensively to some degree going into the second half. But that Penn State certainly will have some early success. How much do they have the Nittany Lions? Have they been able to start out strong to begin the game? Are they more of a first half team, more of a second half team? What do you see are kind of the keys for this offense to succeed right out of the gates at the Big House?
Well, this is starting to become less and less of a secret each week based on Penn State's strengths. They play a certain way and they have a blueprint that they want to follow. You are going to see at least Penn State try. I'm not saying that they will. I hope they will, but you're going to see them try to jump out to a 2-score lead, whether that's 10-0, 14-0. They are going to try to score early and score fast. They want to make Michigan and any team play from behind, because then it forces that Michigan offense or anybody to pass into that secondary to allow that Manny Diaz defense to come alive into blitz. Penn State doesn't win this game by going into a 7-7 game at halftime or whatever, anything that's a 3-point or a tie game. They need to be up by a good amount, any deficit that they have the advantage in, and force JJ McCarthy to throw against that secondary and see that blitz. That is what Penn State's trying to do. If you go to the Auburn game, Penn State goes for it on its first drive at midfield. Now, they didn't need to, but they wanted to because they didn't know how bad that Auburn team was. If Auburn was better, they would have capitalized on that and made them pay for that mistake. But Penn State wanted to go, hey, we want to force TJ Finley at the time. He was on the field. He wasn't hurt. They wanted to force him to pass against that secondary. And that's what they're going to say to Michigan, especially when Michigan's a run first team.
Yeah, it's this is where I wonder if Michigan becomes more pass first as well, because we did see that early on against Indiana. I don't take much out of the first half struggles for Michigan against Indiana, and credit to those who actually in the national media went and said this. But it's hard to take anything out of that first half for Michigan. Really the first time, well, I wouldn't say the first time we've seen Michigan struggle in the first half. Michigan certainly has been a second half team, but after the first drive where it just, moved right through the Indiana defense like a hot knife through butter, the same way it did the week before against Iowa. And then Mike Hart collapses and suddenly the team feels kind of lifeless. It's hard for me to sit there and sit there and say they should have been better when, I said this on Locked On Wolverines on Monday. I was shook the entire game, and I have no, I'm just on the sidelines with a camera, right? Like it was a difficult situation for me and every other person that was a photographer that has been covering the team for some time. I didn't even know what the people in the press box were thinking. So as far as that's concerned, I give them a pass. But JJ McCarthy started to really come alive in the pass game. We've known that he was capable of it. He's had big games before, even as a backup, certainly early in the season, glimpses of what he was capable of. But 304 yards against Indiana, this is certainly a more difficult defense, but it hasn't seemed to matter who he's played. He's played well when it comes to passing the ball in terms of not making big mistakes. He leads the country in completion percentage, 78.2%. So I'm curious to see how that will work. And especially when I'm looking at this Penn State pass defense, 110th in the country. But as I've just been saying, that doesn't tell the whole story. They faced the 11th most pass attempts on them. And I believe, or somewhere, I can't remember offhand, but hovering around 10th in yards per completion. So yards per attempt. So it's certainly a difficult front. What are your concerns about going to the Big House? So far, there's only been one win against Michigan on the road by James Franklin. And that sole win came in the COVID year. I was one of the, handful of people there that got to see it in person. And it both were really bad teams. Michigan tried to replace Joe Milton with Cade McNamara as a starter. McNamara gets hurt. Joe Milton was already injured. He's out there. He looked bad. We saw Will Levis play in that game. It was a weird, just all around bizarre, annoying game. And neither team really looked like a college football team. Certainly this is a little bit different. So what's your concern level about going and playing in a hostile environment?
Well, Penn State's battle tested this year. They went on the road to Purdue. They went on the road to Auburn. That was the first time any Big Ten team had played at Jordan-Hare Stadium against Auburn. So they are battle tested. They're road tested. Do I think Ann Arbor, the Big House, is probably the rowdiest venue that they're going to play at? I think Auburn early in the game definitely showed that they are a hostile environment, but it's not like this is a big surprise to Penn State. Like, oh man, they went on the road to some slouch of a MAC team and the crowd wasn't that big. Like, they've done this twice now and right out of the gate to start the season. So they're not intimidated by any means. And from what I'm gathering, they're just really confident. They believe that they're one of the better teams in the country. They believe that they are a playoff contender. Does the Penn State fan base, national media, and everybody else think that? Probably not, but I'm glad that they have that confidence. So they want to go in and shake up the party a little bit. I think they're looking forward to the fact that it is at Michigan.
Well, Michigan's last couple of years has had that same type of road mentality. Obviously coming off of Iowa and then Indiana, which is always a really weird place to play. I've been to Indiana 5 times and 4 of the 5 have been weird. It's never been like, except for 2019 when I went to Indiana. That's the only time I ever went. And it was like, yeah, this is just an easy game for Michigan. And I didn't even think that going in. Nonetheless, before we move on, what are the things that you look at that are the biggest challenges for Penn State? What do you look at in Michigan that you're most leery of?
I think that you're going to have to deal with that pass rush. Well, let's start with Sean Clifford, because Clifford has been prone to not the frequency of turnovers, but the big turnover, the untimely turnover. He had that against Purdue, and they were able to get themselves out of it. Sean Clifford led the drive down the field that won them the game, but he also put them in that position. Is that going to happen against a top 5 team, a college football playoff team from a year ago, where they will make you pay for that if you throw a pick 6 late in the 4th? Purdue didn't have the run game to churn out the time and make the clock work against Penn State, but Michigan does. So for me, it starts with Sean Clifford has to avoid that big turnover. And he's been fairly clean, 12 touchdowns to that 1 interception. And then he had the 1 in the rain against Northwestern. Penn State's +6 in turnovers, but they had 5. They had 5 alone in that game against Northwestern, the 4 fumbles and the 1 interception. So it starts there. Sean Clifford's got to protect the football. And then after that, can you get the football back from Michigan? Because I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan really slows down the tempo and they just try to run the football with Blake Corum and keep the Penn State offense off of the field. They scored 35 against Purdue. They scored 41 against Auburn, and against Ohio. Yeah, they scored 46 against Ohio, and they scored 33 against Central Michigan, but those are MAC opponents. The 17 against Northwestern, again, that's That's Hurricane Ian. That's all that weather there, the weather playing the extra defense for Northwestern. So I'm concerned if Michigan can game plan right and keep this as close as possible and basically control the tempo, because Penn State has led a lot of times in time of possession. They've actually been really good about that. So if Michigan can flip that and really take like a 10-minute advantage in that category, then those are the two things that I'm looking at where Penn State can win this game if they do those two things right.
Well, Michigan will try to control the time of possession. That is certainly something that they do. They are not trying to, let's just say they're not trying to be Ohio State. Michigan is not trying to just get 50 points and get out of there. That's not what they're doing. So they are going to try to control the time of possession. We'll get more of my thoughts on the game here on the other end. But before we do, listen, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. You are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. That's right. Ready, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built is done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs. And let me tell you, I love the puffs. Those are, I am a puffs fan, more so than even the regular bars. That's how good they are. They're light. They have a chewy texture and real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to built.com, snag a box for you and the family. It will be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place or just hoard them for yourself, which is what I do, as I've said many a time on my podcast. My roommates stole them, so I keep the boxes in my room now. That really happens. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. So good. What's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to built.com, use the promo code locked on 15 rather, and get 15% off of your next order. Built.com, promo code locked on 15. All right, let's finish out here. I am looking at this matchup and I'm not really sure what is going to happen. I think this is one of those types of games where most people on either end are probably really confident. And I think rightfully so. Michigan still feels like a work in progress. Penn State still feels like a work in progress, right? Both teams have new defensive coordinators. And I believe Penn State has a new offensive coordinator this year too, right? Because no more, what's his name? Kirk Shiraka. He went back to Minnesota, right?
He went back to Minnesota. It's actually year 2 for Mike Yurcich.
Okay. I forgot about Mike Yurcich. So a little bit more established there. The way I see this game is Michigan needs to not be stodgy if it can't get what it wants in the run game. Now, last year, Michigan wasn't. Kind of struggled in the run game, found ways to pass the ball. Michigan has a little bit more of a capable quarterback. That's not a knock on Caden McNamara. It's just a statement of how good JJ McCarthy is from a talent perspective. I think that Michigan needs to utilize him. And I think that with all of this talk that has kind of permeated national media, Joel Klatt, good friend of mine in the show, but he's out there saying that it's that the tendencies are obvious. And Michigan, I asked Sharon Moore, the co-offensive coordinator for Michigan today. I said, what do you make of that? With Joel Klatt's comments. And he said, listen, we know our tendencies better than anybody. We know exactly what's going on. So that makes me think that Michigan, and we've seen this from Jim Harbaugh's teams from time to time, where they try not to pull all the cats out of the bag until they have a big opponent to do so against. Thinking back to 2018 against Wisconsin. Wisconsin was like by far thought of as a team that was going to come into the big house and win that game. And, College game day was there. No one really had any faith in Michigan. Michigan had lost to Notre Dame. And then suddenly Michigan's offense, it looks completely different. I kind of have the feeling that's what we're going to see to some degree. Not that it's going to be completely different, but we haven't really seen JJ McCarthy utilize his arm, which is his most important feature. His second most important feature, running the football. Very, very few runs. Part of that could be because of the injury at the quarterback position with Cade McNamara being out. But I feel like this is a situation where we could see the offense utilize a lot more aspects that we haven't really seen. It seemed like it's kind of on training wheels, which is kind of weird considering that the bulk of the offense is the same as the one we saw last year when they were the most explosive team in the country. Yet it just seems like it's just kind of, like I said, on training wheels. So defensively, I think it's going to be a challenge for Michigan. There's a lot more to defend at Penn State, even when there's been some of those games going against the Nittany Lions, 2020, 2021. I feel like Penn State finds ways to get guys involved, even though usually it's somebody that isn't the main culprit. You know, Parker Washington a couple years ago, no one really was talking about him on a national perspective. I don't think I knew who he was going into the game. And then suddenly I knew in a hurry who he was. Jahan Dotson wasn't really the guy that punished them. That's generally been the case, that it isn't the main guy, except for Saquon in 2017. It really hasn't been whoever the main guy is. So I'm wondering who it is that steps up for Penn State. So with that in mind, if you were to pick an off the radar type guy for the Nittany Lions, who do you think it would be? Whether it's we already know about the two running backs. Is there a tight end or wide receiver who's ready to step into the prime that maybe just quite hasn't gotten that type of opportunity yet?
Well, the wide receivers haven't been asked to take over a game just yet. I think that unsung guy, but people know about him because he's supposed to be the number one wide receiver, and that's Mitchell Tinsley. He takes over in Jahan Dotson's role as that option route receiver, where him and Sean Clifford, basically the way that Penn State runs this offense, that receiver runs two routes. He picks one, and Sean Clifford and him have to be on the same page. That's very tough to do. They got to see the same thing from different perspectives on the field. So if anyone's going to be that surprise guy to step up, it's Mitchell Tinsley in this game, because I think you're going to have to pass more since Michigan is sound up front. Everyone tells me about the defensive line. Even though they've lost Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo, like they've still retained a good amount of talent. And with that being said, Sean Clifford's going to have to find a way to get that connection. The obvious choice is Brenton Strange, because that's who Sean Clifford has picked on a lot. Brenton Strange has become Mr. Reliable so far. And it was pretty crowded in that tight end room. Nobody really knew for Penn State who was going to emerge, if it was going to be Strange or Theo Johnson or Tyler Warren, because they used all three evenly last year. And now it's Brenton Strange's job. Like, he's cleared TE number one. But those are the guys you're going to have to look at. If you're looking for a not so obvious one, it's Mitchell Tinsley. The obvious ones are the running backs and then probably Brenton Strange.
Well, I'll be interested to see. It would be if it's Theo Johnson. He was a guy that Michigan was really, really, really hard after, and made several visits to the big house and didn't end up pulling the trigger in Ann Arbor, went to Happy Valley. But I'll be curious to see. I feel like this is going to obviously be a bigger test. I think Penn State's going to give Michigan a lot more than people think in this area or even nationally. But I'm not chalking it up to a Michigan win. I am trending towards picking it that way, but I have not come up with my final decision personally. But it's certainly going to be a challenge. Relatively equal teams as far as talent. I think Michigan's a little bit more experienced, and it is at home. Those are the things I think are working in Michigan's favor. Penn State, I think, has a little bit more of a surprise factor to some degree and is really stout on both lines. And I think that if they come in and play really, really strong, and like you said, put Michigan behind, because Michigan hasn't really been in that situation. It has been behind a few times this year, but not by multiple scores. That certainly would change things. But I also think Michigan has the tools to come back with as many wideouts and big time playmakers that they have that they just haven't necessarily utilized. All right, we are running out of time. Zoom is literally telling us that we are running out of time. So that's going to do it for the Locked On Wolverines / Nittany Lions crossover episode. He's Zach Seyko. I'm Isaiah Hole. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.